Hey guys, I just wanted to share something with you that I thought about the verse Proverbs 27:17. This is a very quotable verse. I'm sure you probably heard it all over the place. And it goes a little something like this. As iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens the countenance of his friend. Obviously, I think a lot of people, when we think about iron sharpening iron, and when we read this verse, we think about something. And what we think about is, I think we think about a blade, something like this. Very smooth edged. Obviously, this is a pretty small one. There isn't actually edge on this. This is just kind of a fake blade. But we think about a weapon something like this. And we're imagining two friends sharpening each other, right? And they look like this. See, this is a very, pretty much a refined blade, right? If this had the sharp edge on it, and you see all the craftsmanship and the work that was put into this blade. But what blade ever starts out like this? Think about it. What blade starts out like this? If you know anything about blacksmithing, a blade will never start out looking something like this. They start out as raw metal, right? These are railroad spikes. You see it, this one, it's kind of got some edges on it. It's kind of crooked. It's not nice and straight. This one's a little bit too. They're old, they're rusted. And you see, when I started thinking about this verse, I was like, well, just plain old iron or a plain piece of metal, right? It doesn't start out nice, refined, and beautiful, and this sharp tool that's used for precision stuff. It starts out rough. It starts out ugly sometimes, right? You see, when you rub these things together, right? Like, it's got to, if I started physically thinking about, if I was, had all these rough edges and things rubbing up against me, that hurts. I'm literally wearing part of myself down, right? So I'm doing this process with a friend. And the thing is that got me thinking, why do we have so many churches full of railroad spikes and not a lot of them full of blades? And I think it's because we're scared of this process right here. We're actually scared to, number one, be open, right? Be open with our problems, to expose that we have rust on us, that we might not be perfectly aligned, to a straight line. We're not 180 degrees. We might be a bit crooked here or there, right? We have all these flaws, and it's hard for us to admit that to somebody else. But the only way for us to go from this to this is that you have to have this process right here. Two friends that are being raw with one another. They admit their flaws. They accept the fact that they aren't perfect and that they never can be perfect, but they have to go through this process to make each other better. And see, you don't just go from this to this, right? You're skipping a few processes, right? And sometimes I think, even when we do this process with a friend, we think that we're magically supposed to turn into one of these. But that doesn't happen overnight. That takes time. That takes a lot of preparation. That takes a lot of this process of these two guys rubbing together. See, a good middle stage might be something more like this. This is a knife that somebody actually made out of a railroad spike. And see, even to get here, you see, you can actually, I don't know if you can see it on this camera or not, but you can still see hammer marks on this blade. You can see that it's not perfect, it's not pristine, but you can see it has the edge to it, right? It's starting to get the shape to it, right? It's a lot further along than this one. But the only way for us to go from this to this is we have to be willing to look like this for a while, right? There's always a growing process. There's always a time investment, and it's not always going to be easy. Admitting that you have rust, admitting that you aren't perfectly aligned, admitting that, that I don't fit the mold that I think a Christian should, or how I don't live a perfect life. That's hard to admit sometimes, right? But in order for us to become the Christians that we're meant to be, it starts right here. It starts by admitting our flaws. It starts by saying that we have missing pieces. We've got chunks that have been taken out of us. It takes admitting that along the way we've gathered rust. It goes, it takes this process right here in order for us to become better Christians, in order to become better people. So don't be afraid to admit you're flawed. We all are. We all are. And see, one person admitting that they're flawed all by themselves, I've got nothing to go up against it, right? You have to be willing to do this with somebody else that's going on the same path that you are, that's in the same place that you are. And you got to be willing to work out of each other's problems. And that can be hard because, number one, we're prideful. We don't want to admit all these flaws that we have. And sometimes all the time, we don't like criticism. Criticism does not have to be a bad thing. It doesn't. Having somebody look into your life and be vulnerable is not an easy and sometimes not a pleasant experience, right? Because when you're rubbing against each other, when you're starting to sharpen each other, when you're starting to turn into that blade, it can be painful. It can be rough. However, that's the process that we've been given. So, I don't know who needed to hear that today, but that was something that was kind of on my heart and on my mind. I know this is a shorter video, but, it spoke to me. It reminded me that in order for me to become this honed blade for Christ, I've got to be willing to go through the process. I've got to be willing to admit my flaws, admit that I'm rusted, admit that I'm not perfect. And it also means that I'm not going to go straight to that perfect blade. I'm going to have to look like this for a while. There's still going to be some rough edges. There's still going to be some imperfections. However, this is a necessary step in becoming what God is wanting me to be. And I'll never reach that perfect potential because I'm still human and I'm still flawed. So I have to be willing to admit that I'm not perfect, even in this stage. Because I feel like we've got a lot of people in this stage sitting in our pews in churches, and we got a lot of people in this stage that are trying to act like they're here. We try to act like we're here, right? But all that's doing is hurting ourselves and hurting each other, right? Nobody's perfect. We're never going to be this complete weapon on this side of heaven, right? Because we cannot fully get away from our sinful nature. We can be better, though, than we were yesterday. And this right here is being better than I was yesterday. So, again, I hope that helped somebody, and God bless you.